worlds. I'm in the spirit worlds, I'm in the physical worlds, right? Um, I'm across all timelines. I'm multidimensional. So that's how I like to look at it as a Gemini.
Mm.
You know, we're very curious, right, by nature. So it's like
Yes.
always being that truth seeker,
Yes.
especially in spirituality and esoteric teachings and the mysteries and all of that. That really like gets my brain going, and I love that. I love deep thinking. Um, but I think it's like it's about like also the duality too of like two mirrors, right? So it's the mirror of almost the physical and the unseen, right? And as a medium, it makes sense that I'm a Gemini. And you too, you're clairvoyant. Like it makes sense. We're divine messengers, divine communicators. You know, we are linked to other dimensions, other dimensional beings, spirit. So
Mercurial.
it makes sense. Definitely mercurial. Yes.
You are the middle of five children. The
Yes.
stereotype is the middle child gets a little neglected. What was it like being the middle of five for you?
I never felt, well, I got to be honest, like I was the happy medium, to be honest. And it's interesting to see the perspective of my siblings who always thought I was the favorite.
Oh,
However, yes, it's interesting. And I guess that's because I did have a good relationship with both. I definitely did. Um, I don't know if it's neglected, but there are certain aspects where you do feel a little unseen at times.
mm.
And because I'm so spiritual, I'm like the most spiritual out of my siblings. Um, you know, they have a tendency to kind of say, you know, get your head out of the clouds. But again, I'm across all different dimensions and timelines. So that's why, you know, I beat to my own drum.
Hmm. Were you
Hmm.
raised Catholic?
Yes.
And
I
how
went to Catholic school. I went to Catholic high school, all girls Catholic high school. Yes.
and how did that? I mean, were you raised with sin and guilt and shame, or did that not percolate down to you?
No, 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 no. I think we went to church every Sunday, which was nice. I did like that. I always felt very connected to God, to everything, definitely to the angels. I always felt very connected, some bigger presence around me. Um, and I found like solace in that going to church. But you know, as you evolve and you come into your own, um, you kind of figure out what is church for you, you know. But I was never afraid of God. It was never portrayed that way,
Mm,
to feel guilt or shame or anything like that. To be honest with you,
mm.
um, I know that in some religions, and especially Christianity, and there are lots of people that are taught to fear God, and you know everything is sinful and all of that. But I guess my parents were very laid back in that perspective, but they wanted to instill that moral compass. So I'm grateful for that.
Hmm. Um, so I'm interested in how secondary schools shape people because that's the time when we define our identity in many ways. And so there's preppies and there's jocks and there's nerds. I don't know what group or groups did you find yourself in school?
I'd say, you know, in middle school, it was whatever was popular at the time, you know, through music. I did have a clique that I kind of stayed friendly with since grammar school into my adulthood. We kind of followed each other from the middle school end of Catholic school up until our high school years and beyond in each other's wedding parties. And I'm not married, but I've been in theirs. um, I'd say in high school, I kind of went towards more the preppy side because that was what everybody was then. I know in public school, everyone was still with their high hair and all of that, but I was more, I would say I probably fell into more of the preppy side in
Hmm.
my high school years.
And then you have an associate's degree in American Sign Language and then a
Yes.
bachelor's in speech path and audiology. What led you to that? That's really interesting.
So one of my siblings, who is passed in the spirit world, she passed away about 37 years ago. I grew up with her, only knowing her as acquired cerebral palsy because she was actually born with a brain tumor, but had an accident at the age of 5. And because of lack of oxygen to the brain, she mimicked the same symptoms as cerebral palsy. So I grew up only knowing her as needing a little extra help. And then progressively, that got worse with the brain tumor. So then, but again, we still didn't know at that point it was a brain tumor, but it was, then she was in a wheelchair. And then eventually she needed a special school. But my parents had fought hard for her to be mainstreamed. She had a photographic memory.
Mm,
She was just peace. She was so peace. And I think she was my greatest spiritual teacher, like my first one to really teach me about
mm,
compassion and grace for humankind, and just an open heart. So from there, she inspired me to go into special education and speech pathology because she had a paralyzed vocal cord. So when she was younger and she was intubated, she ripped out the tubing, so she paralyzed the vocal cord, so she kind of spoke in a whisper. And it was my mother's sister, who was a nurse, natural healer, and the one who taught sign language because she taught it to her nursing students, taught us. And sometimes we use sign language with my sister. And then from there, it was almost like second nature that I wanted to help children find their voice. So I think that's part of a Gemini too, is being a great communicator, right? The divine communicator. You activate the souls and the voices um, of people.
mm-hmm.
And just being then in the special education field and the speech pathology, just that's like an honor to her from, you know, guiding me, I would say.
Is that your day job now?
Now, yes, it's called a See It. So I'm a special education itinerant teacher, and I work with mainly children on the spectrum of autism on the preschool level. And I also do parent training. So that's what I do now. I was in the classroom. I've been a job coach for children with special needs on the high school level, making them independent participants of society, which is very rewarding. I've been a sign language interpreter. I've been a special education teacher within the class, a See It one-on-one, parent trainer. So it's always tied back into the special education.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Could we, as an end note, footnotes, tell us what you think about why there's so many more known cases of people on the spectrum? It's, I don't think it's vaccines. What do you think? What do you
I think it
think?
has a lot to do. That's a loaded question, actually. Um, it's part spiritual. I think it's also partly in the foods we eat. Um, Now with vaccines, I never really thought about that in the beginning. I was not feeling it that way. However, I'm not too sure now. I'm on the fence with that. But because I'm not sure if that's changing the patterns of the DNA. However, in my experience, a lot of the fathers have been older, and there's a genetic component. There seems to be.
I know
Also,
that's for sure. They know that
yeah,
for sure. There's a
there's
genetic predisposition.
yeah, there's definitely a genetic component to it because I was finding out there were siblings, there were twins that I was working with that had, you know, were on the spectrum, and then their parents also had, maybe they were on the higher part of the spectrum, but they were definitely on the spectrum too. But I also think it's just a culmination of a lot of different things. And to be honest, a lot of stuff that's in the food, a lot of things that are in the food too.
Like food
Food
preservatives,
dyes,
dyes. Got
food
it.
dyes, especially food dyes affect behavior in a, like, you wouldn't believe.
Uh,
Behavior, escalated behavior, mood swings, outbursts. Um, I would say that's gives like that escalation of behavior. However, there's definitely a genetic component, I feel, somewhere.
it's not a feeling, it's a fact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've heard there's a pediatrician in Texas who I've heard speak, whose daughter's on the spectrum. He's done a lot of research and they know
Right.
there's genetic
And
predisposition.
there's always some genetic link that they could find, someone in the family history,
Uh,
you know? That's what I've in interviewing, before I work with the children of the parents, I'll interview them, and there's always some sort of genetic link, you know?
Greta Thunberg says being on the spectrum can be viewed as a gift. She has focus. She doesn't get distracted by what people say about her. What would you say is the gift that you see in the kids that you work with of being on the spectrum?
Well, I think the spiritual aspect of that is they are highly, highly, highly attuned. They're attuned to everything. They're
Would
attuned to
say
like
they
the
don't pick
buzzing.
up on people's emotional communicative cues.
Right, right. So there's different components to that, but I feel like they're highly attuned in the sense of a buzzing from a fluorescent light. You and I might not think that's something, but to them it's like a bzzz. That could be like vibrating. They are a walking barometer of
Uh,
feeling, hearing, sensing. So Claire is, open, turned on to like the 100th degree. And I
uh,
feel with the energy too. So, and the children that I've worked with, it's an energy exchange too. They're very in tune. So they might not have eye contact, but it also takes a lot to make eye contact.
hmm.
Okay. So from an occupational or, that standpoint too, but it takes a lot. It takes a lot in the muscle memory and everything else within the eyes to focus and look at somebody. But it's a multidimensional thinking. So sometimes I see it as like grids of energy that they can really see everything. And there have been studies, and there have been, I can't name empirical research right now, but books that I've read, in my studies and going for my master's, where people have what they describe as definitely like a spiritual sense and like an attuned spiritual sense when it's presented to them of what it is that they're seeing, feeling, hearing.
Because they're so sensitive.
Very. Mhm.
Would
And music is huge for them
ah,
because with music, that stimulates the vagus nerve.
mm-hmm.
And that's what I didn't realize I was doing. I mean, years ago, I remember getting a download of hearing vagus nerve, vagus nerve, vagus nerve.
Mm.
And now a lot of people are talking about it, but it makes
Yep.
sense. I was intuitively
Mm.
stimulating their vagus nerve. So
Mm.
children would go from not really speaking to all of a sudden it was like the doorway opened and their soul was activated and their voice, you know, many of the kids I worked with, spoke in like Disney character script, whatever their favorite show was, but through music, teaching them through music, singing instruction, all of a sudden like miracles occurred. Humming, you know, working on vowel sounds, but singing instruction. And before you knew it, there were new neural pathways that they were making their own songs to familiar tunes. So, and it's very melodic. So they like that.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on a book about non-pharmaceutical solutions to youth anxiety and depression and being on the spectrum and all those. So I'm really interested in what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And essential oils. Essential
uh,
oils are very good for them too.
lavender.
That depends. I mean, it also, in my experience, peppermint, a lavender blend called Serenity and Balance is more of a grounding blend. And mixed together, I found that my students really flourished with that. And then orange is the oil of abundance. And I saw some miracles with that too.
Hmm.
So it's very interesting because it raises the vibration. It's natural. Again, it gets into the blood barrier, creating those that calm with the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, and stimulates that with the olfactory senses, stimulates the vagus nerve.
Wow, that's a lot to think about. What's your master's called? Your
It's a dual
degree.
master's in general ed, special ed with a concentration in autism.
Mm, this is interesting.
Hmm.
Okay. So, let's get into your other dual Gemini part. That's the psychic medium. How did that get stimulated in the first place? How did you realize that you had that gift?
Well, to be honest, before my sister passed,
Hmm.
I intuitively knew that something was off and something was wrong. And my sister had just come home because she had had an emergency tracheotomy done. She had had the flu, and it turns out I think they said it was the flu, but it was really misdiagnosed pneumonia. So she filled up with fluid. She actually turned blue, and we rushed her to the hospital where she coded, and then they brought her back. They performed an emergency tracheotomy. We all had to learn how to do that. They brought her home, and I would say, she was here for a little bit of time, but it was like a week prior. She was only here for about a few months. A week prior to her passing, I just got this sense, and I said, "Mom, is she okay?" And she said, "Well, why would you ask that?" And I said, "I just have this feeling. Are you sure she's okay?" "Yeah, she's fine. She's fine." And she ended up passing away in her sleep. So I guess at that point they said that the tumor had grown so big it was the size of, I think, I want to say a grapefruit or a cantaloupe. It was really big, and it eventually just cut off her airway. So I'd like to think that she went peacefully. She always comes in peacefully. So, but that's when I would say my extrasensory abilities started to kind of open up. When I was attuned in IET, integrated energy therapy with Stephen Thayer and the angels, that's when they really showed us, showed me that I was never alone. The angels were always with me. And in those times when I felt alone, because at 2, she had her accident, she was 5. But I was often given to babysitters, right? Because my parents had to go to the hospital back and forth from New York to Albany, where it had happened. So for 3 months, I was just shipped around to all these babysitters. And although I influenced everybody, they said later, to have families and have children, I often felt alone, like there was something had done to be given away. So in my little mind, I I kind of then grew up to be like a people pleaser. But then when I was attuned in IET, it all made sense because they brought me right back to my sister in the hospital bed, my parents on either side, and instantly they made me feel everyone's feelings at once. And it was like I was just enveloped in this peace and this new knowledge of it had nothing to do with you. This is what was going on. We've never left you. And even though you felt so alone, we carried you the whole time. So those are like my angels, my spirit team, just waiting for me then to open up more to them. And through my energy work, that's when they started opening up more. And then people in my family started to show up before they passed. So their higher self would come to me. And my mom has sisters that died 2 days apart. And one of them was a responder to 9/11 and years later got pancreatic cancer. And she was a nurse. And they both were, but the one responded. And anyhow, she had given me the vision beforehand. And it felt very tragic and very much like 9/11 because when the coffins were side by side, it was like the Twin Towers. But the tragic, monumental shift in our family from that grief was so huge. So it made sense after that I was actually watching her go to heaven. I do remember her looking at me and giving me that feeling that washed over me like, this is not what I wanted. Like, I still have a lot to live. Um, and it was interesting, my other aunt who taught me sign language, before she passed, she'd always go into kidney dialysis. And I remember her saying she couldn't speak. She had a stroke. So she signed to me. I said, "Can you sign to me?" She signed back, "Yes." She kept saying, "God is here. God is here. Can't you see him? He's beautiful. He's magnificent. He's right here." And she was in awe just looking at what had opened up before her, above her. And I would just remember going, "God is here," signing back to her, "Yes, yes." She never remembered after, but she did sign her DNR papers. So it was like she had a conversation and knew that she would be going with my aunt in the next few days. And then from there, it was like that's when they started to reveal themselves to me in my sessions. And at first, it came through music. And that would help me better tell my clients what issues were stuck in their cellular memory, what traumas they were holding on to, and how they needed to release that. And then from there, it was just more messages, and till it opened up where I was seeing them in visions. And then when the pandemic happened, there was like a crowded bar room. They were all ready, and I had been doing it beforehand, but they were like really ready to connect. And then my sister's best friend lost her daughter. And before she passed, she came to me. Um, of course, I didn't reveal that. I just told my sister at a certain point, I think it's time for her to have a conversation. And she didn't even have to because her daughter had kind of said, I'm ready. And, but after she passed, I was woken up from a sound sleep. I heard this little giggle. Someone plopped on the couch next to me, and I said, Madison? Ha ha, you're going to get messages to my mom, I heard. I said, okay. And then it was like full steam ahead. And then with my dad passing, that was a huge turning point. I kind of stepped away for a minute because it was hard dealing with my own grief. But it was the mediumship and it was the energy work that got me through it. And he too kind of like passed on the torch of healing to me. He had come to me the night he passed, and he put his forehead to mine. And I knew that that was going to be significant, but I didn't know what exactly it was. And then I kept getting messages to do energy work with the four winds. I kept getting like hummingbirds and the four winds written out on like landscaping trucks. So I took that, and that's how you seal the rite. When you pass on the energetic transmission to others, you seal it forehead to forehead.
Does he came to you physically with the forehead to forehead?
The visitation, the night he passed,
Oh, wait, in spirit or
in
in physical?
spirit, in
Uh,
spirit, but like I could feel him. I could feel him. It was so amazing. I could feel him. And that's how you seal some of the energetic transmissions in the shamanic MUNAY-KI rites that I do. So
so IET was the first training that you did that kind of opened
Reiki.
Reiki.
Therapeutic touch was from my aunt teaching me about that.
Nurses do it.
She did the distance healing for clients and for patients at the hospital. So she talked to me about that. And when she passed and I was in her apartment, that's exactly where she pointed me to was her therapeutic touch books. And then she pointed me over to a beautiful album that she had of just me. So she was like my second mom. So
Mm.
that was just such a beautiful thing. And she was always telling me, like, doesn't matter what you want to do, just go for it. So they were guiding me every step of the way. And then from there, I went into Reiki. And then from Reiki, I went to the integrated energy therapy. But I have to say, it was the integrated energy therapy with the angels that really was like, here it is, you
How
know?
did you find IET? What led you to it?
So I had been working in a school district and I became very friendly with an occupational therapist there who had become a master instructor. And she she kind of led me through some sessions and it was quite interesting. And I always had an affinity with the angels. And it just felt divinely guided. And she was hosting a class one day for the basic level. And I took it and I loved it. And it just made sense. It just was like we've been here all along. It was just so natural. So from then, it just you go through basic, intermediate, advanced. So I'm at the advanced level now. So contemplating master instructor. We'll see. Yeah, but it's always been the angels with me. Definitely the angels.
I know that you work with angels that I've heard of in IET, like Ariel, Raphael, Gabriel, Dan. Well, I haven't heard of Michael, but I haven't heard of angels Celestina, Faith, Cassiel, Daniel, and Sarah. So where do those
Right.
come from?
So Every angel is responsible for they're even in the chakras too, the chakra system. But what happens is we hold those cellular memories, right? So we are replacing. So if there's fear, anger, resentment, anything like that, there's an angel that specifically is for the replacement of, love and compassion, grace and understanding, forgiveness. And that's where those angels fall in. Um, so I have something here that I could share with you. Okay. Just hold on. Give me a second here.
Sure.
But they all about love, compassion, strength. Let me see. Where's my.
I read Thayer's book, and he said that the angels are represent oneness, unity, love, and that a lot
Mm-hmm.
of our concepts of individuality don't relate to them. So they throughout the book they kept saying this, you're not going to understand this fully, but
Right. And also, well, they're definitely here. I'm so hot. That happens a lot. Um, and they also, they respond to certain rays of color, right? So you just think of like the colors of the rainbow, right? It makes sense with the chakras as well. Um, but they are like multidimensional. So even though that's it's written in the book, he was the one that had this download for IET. Um, but they're also like some of them are portrayed feminine, some are masculine, some are like in between. But I just want to pull up. Here we go. Thank you, angels. So divine love, right? So heartache, betrayal is the heart chakra. That's Celestina.
wait, could you lower your screen a little bit because I'm only seeing.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay, that's
Sorry.
great. That's great.
So Celestina is about heartache and betrayal. Faith is about like angel empowerment, lack of trust. That's the throat. Cassiel is the shoulda, coulda, wouldas of life
Hmm.
up here, right? Archangel Michael is up here too, the throat chakra. Your stomach and spleen is Angel Daniel. That's forgiveness. That has a lot to do with forgiveness. Sarah is the sacral, and that's all about just having ease in the body. Let's see.
And but
Gabriel.
those names like Sarah are unique to Thayer, right?
Well, that's who I learned them from.
Because I've never, yeah, who's ever heard of
Yeah,
Angel Sarah?
right. That's who I learned them from. Raphael, of course, is an angel of healing, right? So that's like guilt, replacing it with innocence. New beginnings is Ariel. That's like fear, replacing it with safety. Cassiel, emotional peace. I just said that. The shoulda, coulda, wouldas. Yeah, so they all are to the chakras. And what you're doing is you are locating where in the cellular memory people are holding on to that trauma, and you're actually replacing it. So it's like you're like removing and replacing, removing and replacing. The angels are.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have one that you particularly have affinity for
You know,
recently?
Ariel, Michael, Ariel, I call upon Raphael and Gabriel a lot. Actually, all of them but I want to say this one is not listed in there, but Haniel is a big one for me.
How do you spell that?
Haniel is H as in Harry, Aniel. Haniel. She's also with the phases of the moon, but intuition. Yeah. So Haniel was like the first, actually one of my first angels to kind of make herself known to me, actually, before the IT, which is interesting because she's not listed necessarily as the 9 healing angels, but she's definitely one of the angels. Um, and that's associated like with the crown and third eye. So
Oh,
she's all
Haniel,
about.
I haven't heard of her either. So that's someone that you discovered even before IET.
Yeah, that's who came to me. I kept hearing this. And I'm like, am I hearing that right? Haniel, Haniel, Haniel. And then I looked it up and I was like, okay, yeah.
Mm.
So she's one that is one of my go-tos. Michael, of course, I'm always calling on him to cut cords, always. And to he's like the blue sword of flame, right? Sometimes you feel heat with him. Lots of times you feel heat with him. Like I'm like roasting right now. And that's what there's such a calming presence, but I have a tendency to get hot. Sometimes you feel coolness too, but I feel like with them, it's the energy increase, the influx.
Hmm. Can you think of an example where they gave you a message, uh-oh, watch out, don't go that way, or do something, but they had a
Yes,
specific.
yes. So I was supposed to go to a job interview in the Bronx. And at the time I was in Nassau, Long Island. And I'd say the Bronx is probably over an hour from where I was. And I was all dressed for the interview. I had an iced coffee. And I said, okay, angels, if I'm not meant to go to this interview, give me a sign. And I picked up that iced coffee, and it was like someone squished my glass. It went all over me. And I had a puddle of iced blueberry coffee. It was everywhere. So I called up the man and I said to him, listen, I don't know how spiritual you are, but I believe in my people on the other side. So, and in higher dimensions. And I kind of said it to him. We both laughed about it. And he's like, listen, it's my birthday. Just come in. Just come in. He probably was working on commission. I don't blame him for trying to make a sales pitch. I didn't listen. I said, okay. I went in. It took me so long out of the way. It took me like 3 hours, Gail, to get to what would be an hour. And I'm like, I'm getting the chills as I say this. Yeah, I know I have to listen. But now I'm sharp. If they say no, I don't do it. And would you know, I went in there. I mean, I was so lost. He was like, how did you end up by the bowl fields? Like, it was so crazy. When I got out of that, it was gridlock. And it was, when I tell you, torrential, that I couldn't see anything in front of me. It was like somebody just had a fire hose and just kept going like this. It took me almost 4 hours to get home that day.
Oh gosh.
So that's a sign, right? So sometimes you could be specific, but most of the time you'd be surprised. But that was like, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. All over me, all over the car, everywhere.
Wow.
So that was a big one. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to me that Ariel tells there that angels communicate through intuition, through
Mm-hmm.
direct kind of words and images. They'll tell
Mm-hmm.
you, go talk to this person. So I've
Mm-hmm.
always wondered that when I get a strong intuitive hit, is that from me or is that from guidance?
Now, if you're asking the angel specifically, because you have free will, they'll never intervene unless you ask them directly. So if you're going to call on an angel, then that's going to be, if you're going to see a billboard sign with something or whatever it is that they're going to send to you, repeating numbers or flashing lights or anything, sirens, no, like don't go. Um, if you're going to ask them directly, they're going to give you the guidance. If you're just going to make the intention, that could be your guide, right? But go direct. So just ask the angels. And you can even say, like, send who needs to be with me right now, for family, for friends, for clients, for yourself. And you'll get the signs that they're there. You'll either start to, well, you're clairvoyant, so you might see the color, right? According to the chakra or their ray of color. You might actually flat out just start to hear. You might see a name, Daniel, Michael, Cassio. It's a little
Not
tricky. I've
so
never
much.
seen that. I've never seen, you could see Sarah, Ariel, maybe, but Daniel, Michael, like more of the common names you'll see.
Hmm.
So I just think it's so interesting. You will see it though. They'll be very specific.
And you work with guides too as well, and maybe they have
Mhm.
had human incarnations where an angel hasn't.
Right. Yes. And it's funny. It's all opinion too, because I've trained with very highly world-renowned mediums and psychics and everything, and everybody's got a different answer about guides. I
Mm.
personally believe When your family members die, they're part of your soul group. So they're going to guide you too. Some people don't believe they could be your guides.
Oh,
So, I mean, guides could be ascended masters. Guides can be, as you said, right? Guides could be saints. Guides could be Jesus. You know, so it's all in the signs they show you and how you decipher that. But they're usually very clear. And it's interesting because they'll know if I'm working with somebody that's more into biblical scripture, they'll give me scriptures. So they're very spirit is so intelligent. Angels are intelligent. They'll give whatever that person they meet them at that level, and I'm able to kind of like give it to them however they'll best understand it. You
yeah.
know,
Yeah, I have that.
I don't know the Bible back and front. That's for certain. I don't know that.
But they help with it. Well,
Yeah.
you mentioned you've taken classes with some really impressive people. So James Van Prague,
Hmm.
Cindy Dale, Chris Ratner, The Four Winds, Julian Jenkins, Suzanne Gleisman, Helen Devada, Jackie Wright.
Vita. Hmm.
So tell us a little bit about all that and what you learned and their different approaches with that kind of thing.
I basically the mechanics of mediumship, um, guided meditation. Definitely, some call it sitting in the power. Some call it sitting in the divine essence of yourself, your soul, and getting to know yourself first. And then from there, allowing spirit to come in and work with you. But they really want you to know yourself, like know thyself first, right? So that's where you start. You start tapping into that divine essence and how you're connected to everything. And then from there, spirit can be guided in, the veil could be lifted, and they could that come through. Everybody has a little different, like I said, a different way of teaching it. But basically, it's all the same, and that is tapping into your divine essence and then inviting the spirit world in. Some of them feel that you should be sitting in a, in a circle for a long time. But some people feel like if you're a natural medium, then it's just learning the mechanics and just tweaking a little bit to like really open you up more. But definitely sitting in the silence. And I feel like my guides will say that too. Like if I haven't sat in the silence enough, I'll hear like it's time to sit in the silence. And basically, what that is, it's fuel to hold the vibration of when you're doing mediumship demonstration
Mm.
or when you're even doing one-on-ones, groups one-to-one. That's what how you hold the vibration is by building your own power, right? You build that vibration, you build that power, and then from there you can hold the vibration longer. And it's all about the breath.
Oh,
Breath is key.
oh.
The breath is key. It's really about the breath, linking spirit to spirit, right? Linking in with those spirits that want to come through, inviting, creating sacred space, right? It's all in practicing that. It's inviting your guides and then holding them within that vibration and inviting them into your auric field and
The,
coming from behind.
the Berkeley Psychic Institute tools that I learned from my teacher in Chico Psychic Institute, where they would have you kind of run a kind of white energy that they only ran to channel because it moves you out of the body and they never want
Uh-huh.
it to happen except when you're channeling. So you kind of go out and then unground, leave the body in a way so that they can channel through your fifth chakra. Does
Right.
does that sound familiar in some ways?
A little bit, but this is more, it's more like you, okay, so being the medium, it's like they have to come down a little bit and you have to go up, raise your vibration, and you meet somewhere in the middle, right? I wouldn't say necessarily that it's leaving the body, but it's a matter of just matching that frequency and
Mm,
vibration.
mm. Um,
But
if
it does feel like a quickening in a sense. And is that something that you experience with the white light? Like it feels like a buzzing and like a quickening and like a, right?
yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
If you don't mind, I'm sure a lot of people would like to know how to deal with the fear, anxiety, worry in the political situation in the world today. Do you have
Okay.
like a little demo of bringing in an angel or a guide that would counsel people about how to deal with this fearful
I
situation
think
politically?
I think that it's funny. I don't really touch into politics a lot, but I'll send healing energy, right, to everyone involved for the highest good and highest being of everyone involved, right? And I kind of don't make it so specific about me. I just let them do it. So it's inviting them in, right, from the spirit, from the other dimensions, and like together sending. But it's not so much me as it's I'm stepping aside and holding space for them to send the healing. Does that make sense? For them to send the healing where it needs to go, who it needs to go to get into the hearts of humanity, and how they're going to do that. So it's not really me doing it. Does that make sense?
Of course. Does anyone
So my intention is always for the highest good of everyone, right? Whatever that is. It's not up to me. It's I leave that up to them.
Is there anyone who would like to come in now? Just tell it, give us some words of wisdom for a minute or so.
Let's see. Right away. So Daniel is the angel of forgiveness. And coming through is just seeing the soul as it's easier to forgive and it's easier to find love and compassion when you see everybody as a small child. It's so easy to extend grace to people when you see them as a small child, right? That is before anything has interfered with their process of thinking or anything like that. So if we can see everybody at that level and extend and open our hearts to have that greater compassion, that greater forgiveness, I think that brings a bigger sense and source of light. At least it's what I see. It opens your heart more and it takes it out. It takes anything that keeps you separate. It keeps you out of ego, out of belief systems, out of what anybody feels, out of any prejudices. It's all about love, a frequency of love, love, compassion, and forgiveness globally. And just having that trust and faith that everything is working out in divine timing. Sometimes structures have to fall apart, not sometimes, but to be rebuilt, right? And it's about holding that prayer and intention and sending that energy that the right people would be in the right stages of office, right? With the loving hands, guidance from above and around them in the spirit world. I've seen that. I've seen that, we all hear about guardian angels, but we do. We have them. They're about 30 feet tall of light. We all have them. And the more that we come from that place of a heart centered space, the more healing that can happen on a monumental level.
And that this is Daniel. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Daniel. That's a good
Mm-hmm.
reminder.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So, yeah, stepping away from ego and anything, just pure love.
Easier
How do
said
you
than
feel?
done. Easier
It,
said
of
than
course,
done.
right. But if you come from that heart space, right, where it's only love, right?
The small child image helps.
It, and I think that when I work with my clients too, it's almost like you see the softening
Mm.
because what do you automatically do when you see a child, right? For most people, your heart just automatically opens, and you're joyful and you're playful and you know, that's all you can think about is just the happiness that they bring and that joy. And I think when you focus on that, that's where the healing occurs too. I mean, easier said than done, but you know,
Well, that's what we're here for, is to grow and learn.
right? Right?
Yeah.
Mhm,
Let's talk about the classes that you offer. You
mhm.
teach mediumship.
I teach intuition courses. Eventually, I'm thinking about teaching mediumship courses, but for right now, I'm just teaching the intuition, opening you up to all of your clairs, opening you up to your intuition, your inner wisdom, to be that barometer, to use your your gut instincts, your natural instincts, all of that. And I also teach the shamanic MUNAY-KI rites.
What is that?
So those are 10 rites, and it comes from the shamans of the like Andes Mountains in Peru. And Alberto
That's
Violdo
spelled
from the
MUNAK-KI.
MUNAY, right? Dash KI, right? The MUNAY-KI. So Munai, right? And Ki. Ki is the energy, the life force in everything, right? And the Munai is the love of that, right? So it's just one great pure sense of love, right? Universal love, the great love. And what we're always trying to do, right, is I teach people how to be one with nature and also to call on like the spirit guides of nature, to call on the spirits of the trees, the wisdom keepers, right, the earth keepers, the day keepers, the archangels of the lower, middle, and upper worlds, right? Those archetypes of spirit animals too that work with us in our chakras and that work with us for transformation, work with us on the shadow aspect of ourselves and seeing those things and having discernment, working on opening up our hearts, working on always seeing the sweetness of life, right? Through the hummingbird. And then the eagle is always seeing the higher perspective because the eagle flies one with the great spirit, right? Fought like high above the sacred mountains, the holy mountains. So if you always see the higher perspective, right? Come from that heart space. Always seeing the higher perspective, all perspectives, but the highest perspective is the spiritual perspective. And there's always a spiritual solution, as Wayne Dyer said, to every problem. So it's always maintaining that. And that right relationship with one, with nature, with all of us, we're all connected, right? So it's
How,
like that INI, that community, forming that community, being part of helping the world
how did you learn to do the shamanic approach?
through them. So that is through the four winds. And the shamanic approach is just from their teaching. So each energetic transmission I teach, I break it down, like how it's taught, what it's about. And then I actually do the energetic transmission. And it's done through a pie stone. And at the end, all those rites are now in the pie stone, and that is gifted to my student.
What's a pie stone?
A pie stone, I'll show you. So we're like a big torus field, right?
Yes.
Torus field of energy. So picture that's the torus, but when you turn it like this, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, it's like the one with life, the oneness of life. Um, this is often used to some of the rites are, you have to blow it into the crown, right? All of your prayers and all of the guardians and all of the spirit beings that are going to work with you. It's all of that energy in here. So the Munai, the Yunkai, the Yangchai. So that's like your solar plexus center, your heart center, your intuitive center. This is where everything always comes from. So you're always like giving the right that way. But this is what we put it into the pie stone.
And then, so do you carry it around in your pocket, or you?
I do. Well, right now I have it on my altar, surrounded by my crystals. Um, I used to, but now that I'm working with the client, this is specifically for that client. So with each client, at the end, they're going to get that pie stone.
And is it like PIE? Pie?
PI,
PI.
PI.
Does that mean
P,
something in Peruvian or
P,
something?
Pi pi stone. So like it's a symbolic of wholeness, like I was just saying, like we're one and whole, like eternity,
Mm,
right? It's the luminous body.
mm.
So, and the energetic universe, right? So we're all, that's what we're all aiming for, is to be that luminous body, right? That rainbow aura, if you will, the luminescent being, connected to spirit, connected to nature, connected to a higher power, whatever that is for you, right? So I use it in meditation. I use it like for protection sometimes. This one is dragon's blood. You can get them in all different stones, but the circular represents the wholeness of us all, but the wholeness also as the collective, like consciousness.
Did you do the Four Winds training in New York, or did you go to Peru, or where?
No, I did it online.
Oh,
I did it online. I'd love to do a retreat. I mean, they do have in-house trainings to extend and take advanced classes with them. They usually do one Peru. I think there was one. There might have been one in Hawaii, Costa Rica. So they do have beautiful retreats. And one in particular, rite is called the Rite of the Womb. That's something that I've gotten into more with a lot of women that I've been working with. And that's about like releasing all the stored trauma, releasing anything from toxic relationships to betrayal to anything with infertility, anything with a loss of a child, grief, all of that. So this is our powerhouse, right? This is our space of creativity, but it's not a place to store fear or pain. It's a place to remind ourselves that it's a creative space to birth new things to life. So that's in and of itself is part of the things that I do with Mary Magdalene and Mother Mary combined.
and
And
Mary Magdalene isn't part of the shamanic tradition, but you
no,
kind of,
she's not, but I tie her into that because she is heavily in the womb rites herself
uh,
as being a teacher of the mystery teachings. So very esoterically, she was in Egypt. You know, she brought about all of being like a woman to be in her high priestess self, right? To be in her power and truth, to not silence her voice, to come from that creative space, to come from that birthing place, if you will, and not just for children, but for birthing things into the world, right? To holding sacred space for other women, to being that way shower, to show them the way, right? To lead them from the darkness into the light.
do you believe that she married Jesus and they had a daughter named Sarah, like some people believe?
You know, it's interesting. I'm not going to say it. I'm gonna say I'm on the fence about that one, but you know what? The more I kind of read the teachings, it's interesting. I think she definitely walks side by side with him.
Oh, we know that.
Yeah, definitely walk side by side. But I think that there's a lot to be said about that. I don't think that I think that the stories about her aren't necessarily the truth.
Oh, they know that church fathers added the prostitute
Yes,
thing. That's
yes.
true.
No, she was in her power and truth. She supported him monetarily, emotionally, all of that. And I think it was more, you know, she was a seer. She was intuitive. She was a very powerful woman in her own right. So I think it was more of keeping her down.
Yes, you bet. Yeah.
Mhm.
This
And now, go
the
ahead.
people that I've read that say that Mary Magdalene came from the Egyptian mystery school say that Mary also was involved in that training, which is
Yes,
interesting because that would
yes,
make sense, and then she could see the
yes.
reasons.
And then Anna, the grandmother, and Mary wasn't the only Immaculate Conception. There's been others too. So I don't know if you're familiar with Anna, the grandmother. And so there's all the different theories about that as well. But it makes sense that it was, you know, they were high priestess, they were seers, they were intuitives. They, you know, they built empires. They, you know what I mean? So it's just so crazy how women have been really suppressed, you
Yeah.
know? And I think now that everyone is kind of like waking up, if you will, spiritually, there's a lot of people like remembering those teachings and having those guides come through for them. I mean, Mary Magdalene definitely comes through for me, Mother Mary. Mm-hmm.
You also do tarot. Can you, and you teach it? Can you grab a tarot deck and pull a
Oh, I
card
don't
the
teach
way?
it. I don't teach it. I just do intuitive tarot. Yeah, I don't teach it though.
You want to grab a card and see what's in store for us as a country?
I'd rather not.
Okay.
We're getting too political.
Okay.
um, yeah, I think that has to be left to the higher power. That's my take on that. I could pull, you know what I'd like to pull?
Yeah, what?
I mean, I can pull one of these cards.
But don't you have a question, have to have a question in mind or not?
Well, if it's intuitive, it's just, you can have a question in mind. What is your question?
Um, how how can we best help spirituality grow?
Keep speaking the truth. This is the sword of truth. Oh, you can't
Oh,
really see it. It's the sword of truth. And this to me is like Archangel Michael, too.
oh yeah,
Keep speaking the truth. It's time for the truth to be revealed.
super. I like that.
Mm-hmm. Spiritual truth. Stand in your faith. Stand in your power. Stand in your own your truth. Own your yes. Own your no. Do not be infiltrated with anyone else's beliefs. Have your own. Stand in your own power and strength. Right? Be your own person. Take that sword of truth and don't be afraid to wield it. Own it. Right?
That's great. Um, so do you teach in person on Zoom? If someone wanted to take one of your classes, how would they do that?
My classes I teach through Zoom or Google Meet, whichever is better for you. These days, Google Meet seems to be better for me. Zoom, I find is a little glitchy, but I do that online. My mediumship, I also do through Zoom, or I do group demonstrations. I've been doing them at libraries. I also do them at people's homes. I like to keep them fairly small and intimate because together I feel like I like the quality and I like the connectedness and I like the intimacy for people to be seen, heard, for healing to truly happen, for meaningful messages to come through. And I like to keep it that way because it just feels right to me, you know?
Do you find any difference in your access to information online or in person, or does it not, no time, no
To
space?
be honest with you, I originally started on the phone years ago, and people were a little skeptical to that. But energy knows no space and time. It was actually very clear, I thought, even clearer online or over the phone. You know, of course, when I'm with you, you're going to get beautiful messages too, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it knows no space or time, right?
Yeah,
So we're tapping into different dimensions, you know?
I like phone or online because you're less influenced in your personal vision with the person being right in front of you. You know, there's more,
Connection.
subjective. So I'm
Yeah.
more objective without them being in the same room with me.
I understand that too. Because you know what, too, sometimes I mean, it doesn't really happen anymore. But you've always had skeptical people, for my groups meeting. There's always going to be somebody that, which I always just think it's funny because it's like, then why did you come? If you're so skeptical, why did you come? Come with an open heart, and spirit, will kind of give them a message that makes them, say like, okay, but it's not about me proving myself. I trust spirit. That's who I'm an ambassador for. I'm not here to prove myself to you. If you want to be part of it, great. But I do like the connectedness, being with people. As a Gemini, we're all about connection, right? but I like it both ways. I
Yeah,
like a little bit of hybrid, you
yeah,
know?
right. I agree with that. On your website, which is what?
Oh, KieraTalleyMedium.com.
You want to spell that for us?
Sure. Kiera, T as in Tom, Alley.com.
You
Oh, sorry. KieraTalleyMedium.com.
great.
So, do you want me to spell it again?
Yes.
KIeraTalley.com.
You emphasized grief. Why does that come up for you as a kind of repeating theme in your work?
Because so many people have come to me when they've experienced such monumental loss in their life. I also find that even with my clients that are even doing my courses for intuition or the MUNAY-KI, inevitably it's spirit will come through to help them to heal, right? So parents have come through to help them heal. Ex-boyfriends have come through to help them heal. Wherever their trauma has been, somebody does come from the spirit world. And as they're helping the healing to occur, they're getting that too on the other side. So um, grief also, because it hits home for me. So I've experienced it at an early age. Some people are lucky enough and fortunate enough to not really experience that, for so many years in their life.
Like me.
But I think that just coming from a personal space, like I had wished that there was something more of a bereavement that I could have gone to, like to help me navigate that grief, right? And then as I got older, I did like to see mediums because it's nice to know that we don't die and that our loved ones walk alongside of us and they see what's going on in our life because that really helps. It really is a heart opener and it really is a healing and you see it in the people, for the healing that the mediumship occurs for, the healing through the mediumship. So I feel like grief is can be loss on a monumental scale, right? Is
Mm,
it grief of a lost relationship? Is it grief of a lost child? Is it grief of a parent? Is it grief of a friend? Is it grief of a grandparent? Is it, the grief of the guilt that comes with that grief? Not having a moment to say your last goodbyes,
mm,
being at the corner, you're just about to turn the corner, and then it's like they're gone, and not having that closure. So it just comes from a personal space too, that I feel like mediumship really helps you navigate that. At least that's what I try to do in my readings, you
hmm
know, with spirit, is have it be the most, whatever they need, whether that's closure, clarity, healing, whatever that is. If there's something that they wish that their parent was there for, but it's an accomplishment that the parent is going to highlight because it's happening and they see it's happening, so it's almost like they could breathe, because grief is ongoing and grief is, it hits hard some days and it's
hmm
waves.
mm.
So if I can help somebody not feel like they're drowning,
Uh,
then I've definitely did my job of service.
Beautiful. Our last question is your goal for the future. One of them is to work with healers globally. How is that playing out?
Yes. I've taken some courses, of course, with you and many other wonderful healers, right? That's a global network in and of itself to really help globally try to heal. I know there's some women that I've met through Arthur Finley, and where there's talks of like doing other women's groups. You and I have had that conversation. I definitely would love to have a healing impact on the world with other healers, whether that's through retreats or women's groups or things for parents of lost children or spouses or toxic relationships, the grief of that or betrayal. But I definitely feel like that's medicine is going to be different. It's going to be more frequency, vibrational. It's going to be hitting differently. It's not going to be, how do I want to put it? It's not going to be traditional medicine. And I think we all have such great things to offer as light workers that, globally, such a huge impact.
Hmm. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to for people to know who are watching this video that we haven't touched on? We touched on a lot.
I think through the energy work, I'd say, you know, my heart goes out to parents who have children with special needs because I know firsthand how that really can be hard. I've watched my parents go through that. Um, but I think that if we also helped as healers, helped those parents tap into that unseen world and the world of energy, that and the world of elements, that could help their children too, right? Because we're mirrors. And the calmer we are, the calmer we could be for them, right? So
Mm,
starting like that trickle down effect. And as you heal the parents, then it kind of heals the generational things that might be occurring too.
mm,
But not just for the child with the special needs, for even the siblings that
mm,
might feel a little left out, but feel guilty in speaking up
mm,
for their own needs.
mm.
So I like to see more of that too for family units. And that's something I'm thinking about down the line. But maybe even like treating, doing circles for families, you know, and even a safe space for the siblings that just want to vent or, have a good cry or, and hold space for them. Because I think sometimes you feel like you want to be so strong, right? Because you have to be compassionate for this child, but it's like, we have needs, right? So when you're growing up and like feeling like you don't want to, you feel guilty almost, right? If you,
Survivor's guilt.
yeah, if you complain, if you do anything or whatever, but you still need to be heard and seen and, you know, so
Hmm. Beautiful. Thank you.